The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Everybody remembers when President Donald Trump kidded about Canada becoming our 51st state. He even said that then Premier Justin Trudeau could be the governor. Shows that our president has a great sense of humor, but there may have been more to it than that. You see, a separatist movement in Alberta, Canada, has been making headlines, perhaps fulfilling President Trump's premonitions about Canada, or more specifically, parts of Canada becoming America's 51st state. Alberta is far from the only Canadian province seeking greener pastures, although there's been a lot of public speculation. Alberta's eastern neighbor, Saskatchewan, is also exploring a succession movement seeking freedom from the growing bureaucracy and the nanny state being imposed on them from Ottawa. Led by the Saskatchewan United Party, there's a growing populist movement that placed third in the previous national election. The movement for independence is very rapidly gaining steam. Some of my friends out in Staten Island have been talking about the possibility of Staten Island succeeding from New York City, but this is somewhat different. You see, the Canadian Constitution very specifically allows provinces to seek their independence. Now, Saskatchewan is an interesting example because its politics are essentially determined by very rural voters. Rural areas have a firm majority over parliament within the province, with 35 rural seats as opposed to only 26 urban seats. The divide in the different ways of life is coming to a head as the rural areas are sick of paying for the excesses of urban life, including the corruption, and all of this being delivered from Ottawa by the out-of-touch ruling class. New legislation recently passed in Canada requires everyone with a firearm first to register the fact that they own that firearm with the government, but also very shortly to turn them in. This is something that the voters of Saskatchewan, as well as Alberta, are far unlikely to embrace. You see, polling that I have seen indicates that there's a 79% support for independence in the rural areas of Saskatchewan. As the movement for independence gains traction, the ruling party is receiving an increasing amount of pressure to initiate an independence referendum. That's what's called for under the Canadian Constitution. The United Party has already been successful on initiatives such as promoting parental rights and energy reforms that utilize coal, giving them a substantial momentum to embark upon if their grandest project of all comes to fruition, the push for independence. Saskatchewan's oil and natural gas deposits make the province a key driver of Canada's energy sector, while uranium from the northern Saskatchewan powers nuclear energy production around the world. As the tech sector yields a sharp global increase in energy production, Saskatchewan's uranium production capability could grow into a multi-billion-dollar industry within just a few years. The province is also the home to a vast reserve of potash, producing more of this critical ingredient for agriculture than any other area on Earth. Additionally, Saskatchewan's fertile farmlands are among the most productive globally, exporting wheat, canola, and pulses to feed millions. An economically sound national government such as the Trump administration could probably harness Saskatchewan's vast potential that is frankly currently being completely mismanaged and squandered. Again, this is a province that is the richest in Canada when it comes to oil and natural gas. Also, just jumping ahead, were this to become a state, and we'll talk about that process in a moment, it almost certainly would elect 2 Republican U.S. senators. Even though the province should be in a bargaining position of immense strength, weak leadership has caused Saskatchewan to be at the mercy of the preeminent strategic threat of Western civilization, Communist China. Saskatchewan's Premier, Scott Moe, recently traveled to China on a groveling tour focusing on recalibrating the trade relationship between Communist China and Saskatchewan. China's tariffs on canola oil have hit Saskatchewan particularly hard, with the province losing almost $650 million in economic productivity as a result. And Saskatchewan is in a position of economic vulnerability because China recognizes the fecklessness of Canadians' regional and national leaders, whose capitulation to the Chinese has become absolutely certain. So how does this work? Well, first of all, those in Saskatchewan who seek independence have to collect a requisite number of signatures to get it on the ballot. Recently in Alberta, that number of signatures was downgraded very substantially. Activists in Alberta activists in Saskatchewan assure me that they can achieve the ballot status to put this on the ballot. Once a province votes to secede from the Canadian nation, then and only then could they apply to become a U.S. state. That would then have to be approved by a majority of the states, which I think is most likely if you consider that a majority of the states overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump in the last election. Now, should Saskatchewan succeed in becoming our 51st state, it increases the chances that much larger but equally conservative and wealthy Alberta could become our 52nd state. In fact, the two provinces are in kind of a competition to see who gets there first. So when Donald Trump was joking about this, perhaps he wasn't really joking. I haven't looked at the map, but one of my friends tells me that if both Alberta and Saskatchewan in Western Canada joined the United States, from the Canadian border all the way up to the state of Alaska would all be the United States. This is not a pipe dream. It is not pie in the sky. It very definitely could happen. We'll be following it very closely here in the Stone Zone. But remember, you heard it here first, right here in the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Meanwhile, last week, the New York Times and Axios released hit pieces against the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, citing anonymous sources who claimed that her revocation of 37 security clearances from current and former intelligence professionals who have abused the public trust by politicizing and manipulating intelligence has somehow sabotaged the investigation into deep state criminals such as former CIA Director John Brennan and hampered the government's ability to prosecute Brennan. This is, of course, nonsense. I actually know who planted this story. It comes from deep within the bowels of the CIA. I could tell you who it was, but, well, they'd probably kill me. Because a dozen of these staffers are allegedly listed as potential witnesses in the case against former CIA Director John Brennan. Gabbard's decision is claimed by these deep state outlets, the New York Times and Axios, which used to be great news outlets, at least the New York Times did, but today, unfortunately, has become largely just a propaganda sheet for the radical left. They both claim that Gabbard's decision to can these 37 quislings has somehow undermined the cooperation credibility of these individuals in the pursuance of the case. But if the fake news merchants would tell the true story, they would write that holding or not holding a security clearance does not impact any conversations with the DOJ, nor would it have any impact on the potential testimony of those with knowledge. The clearance gives individuals the ability only to see material. It doesn't require analysts to forget what they have already seen. It does not allow or prevent operatives from talking to investigators about what they already know or testifying in court if they are required by subpoena to do so. That is all based on a recipient's clearance and need to know, not whether they presently hold a clearance. So if the Department of Justice has the legal right to ask specifics about what an interviewee knows during an investigation, the status of that particular interviewee's security clearance is completely and totally irrelevant. The notion that individuals with a canceled security clearance would have diminished credibility among a jury is, frankly, completely absurd. Admitted criminals, such as murderers, drug dealers, or those guilty of financial impropriety, for example, are often used as witnesses in high-profile trials. Federal prosecutors regularly build successful cases based on witness testimony from people with less than reputable records. Just because someone has been dismissed from a national security position does not mean that they have been charged with a crime, even though in some cases they may have committed crimes. So there is no reason why this similarly could not be done with individuals who've had their security clearances revoked. In actuality, if there are any deep state criminals put behind bars, frankly, we'll have the actions of former Congresswoman, currently the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to thank for releasing the information that has been so incredibly damning towards them. She has, as you know, exposed sensitive documents that were previously kept under wraps by former National Intelligence directors, including the current CIA Director John Radcliffe, showing that the genesis of Russiagate went straight to the top, with former President Barack Hussein Obama having intimate knowledge and involvement in the conspiracy that was born on July 17, 2017, in the Oval Office, and with officials such as CIA Director John Brennan, the just indicted FBI Director James Comey, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, as well as others, pushing what they knew was completely and totally fabricated intelligence. Any news reports denigrating Gabbard should be treated by my listeners in the Stone Zone with extreme skepticism. She is surviving in the ferocious snake pit of Washington, D.C., which frankly is no easy task, as we have seen many good people flame out or lose their positions attempting to stand up for what is right. Gabbard has become an unsung hero of President Trump's second administration, showing how President Trump learned from his initial hiring flubs to appoint the right people to the right jobs in his historic second term. So the president's administration and MAGA must continue to put pressure on the Department of Justice to initiate deep state prosecutions, accepting no excuses. They have not come nearly fast enough, and any more feet dragging to me is unacceptable. Justice must come expeditiously and punitively for the rule of law to be fully restored. But why this attack on Tulsi Gabbard particularly? Well, I think the greatest reason is because she right now is heading a task force to study the security of the electronic voting machines, and specifically to look at their use in the 2020 election. This is both national security and political dynamite, because there's a high probability, in my opinion, that these machines can be manipulated, and there's an even higher probability that our own Central Intelligence Agency has used this technology. If not in the United States, they have done so abroad. And therefore, I think there's a move afoot within our intelligence agencies not to square with the American people and to head off this inquiry authorized by the President of the United States that is currently being headed by Tulsi Gabbard. They're scared to death that she's going to expose that not only was the 2020 election a fraud, but our intelligence agencies have used the technology that was used to steal the election abroad. That is why it is essential that this effort to discredit her is going forward. That is why this hit piece on her in the New York Times. So now you have it. There's the inside skinny. The swamp runs very deep, but if you want to know what's really going on inside the Beltway, tune into us here at the Stone Zone, and we'll always give you the stone cold truth. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial or click away from us online because, well, we'll be right back with more.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You are re-entering the Stone Zone. Well, the rotting carcass of American academia now stinks worse than ever. Once the proud training ground for statesmen, entrepreneurs, visionaries, and others, our universities have become indoctrination factories for the radical left. The intellectual petri dish that incubated Marxist rot now breeds and sanctifies violence. And nowhere is that more grotesquely manifested in the latest chorus of accolades for the killer of a New Jersey state police officer Joanne Chesimard, better known as Assata Shakur. Let me be absolutely clear. Chesimard was no freedom fighter. She was no activist. She was and remains pure evil. Back in 1973, she murdered New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster in cold blood. While his blood ran into the New Jersey Turnpike, she fled, was convicted, and then broke free, scuttling into the open arms of communist dictator Fidel Castro, who welcomed her to his island gulag with open arms. From Havana, she became a grotesque folk hero for the academic left. Their posters of Che Guevara replaced by this female fugitive from justice whose hands are drenched in American blood. The New York Post correctly reminds us of this in a recent column, that Shakur's twisted legacy is the blueprint for today's leftist terrorists. So it is evocative of the danger that we see even today going on in Chicago, in Portland, and yes, indeed, across the country. And how do our academic overlords respond? Well, they lionize this brutal murder by instructing our children to revere a murderer. The Chicago Teachers Union just disgraced itself further, issuing a statement sanctifying Chesimard. This is not education, this is indoctrination, the glamorization of cop killers, and the wholesale corruption of young minds. But even among the far left, some remnants of conscience remains. New Jersey's liberal governor, Phil Murphy, hardly a conservative firebrand, still had the decency to condemn any accolades for Chesimard. Even Murphy sees through the malignant mythology that says about the grotesqueries of academia and the organized labor's far left mouthpieces. This poison, unfortunately, has consequences. As I recently wrote about the left's dehumanization campaign, whether it is directed at Donald Trump, Elon Musk, or Charlie Kirk, violent rhetoric is an invitation to violence. The canonization of this cop killer is not just historical revisionism, it's a subliminal call to arms. It emboldens radicals. It animates the next activist who believes bloodshed is a form of justice. And mark my words, if you think the grotesque valorization of Chesimard is nauseating, wait until Mumia Abu Jamal dies. The left's apologists in the ivory towers will stage a grotesque orgy of sanctification, weeping crocodile tears as they turn a murderer once again into a martyr. The truth is simple. Academia is no longer merely liberal. It has become the cathedral of radicalism, a high church that preaches hatred of police, hatred of conservatives, hatred of free speech, and hatred of America itself. From the tenured radicals to their street-fighting disciples, they're just as responsible for the violence inflicted upon law enforcement and our fellow citizens as the thugs who swing the batons and light the Molotov cocktails. America must wake up. Chesimard is not a heroine, she's a murderer. She deserves no accolades, no lionization, no elegies in faculty lounges or union halls. I'm Roger Stone, and you're listening to The Stone Zone. I'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's hard to believe, but Socialist Portland City Council member Angelita Murillo recently gave instructions to Antifa radicals on how to hide their identities from authorities against Donald Trump's nationwide crackdown against left-wing terrorism. Murillo told Antifa members to use burner phones, buy them with cash to make them less traceable, and to use encrypted apps so that terror coordination is less likely to be detected. This is an elected official who sits on the Portland City Council. Murillo also told Antifa members to wear masks, even as leftists demand that ICE members not wear masks so that they can be doxxed and their families and they can be harassed. Murillo has been a noted supporter of Antifa terrorists. She recently defended Robert Hoops. He was an Antifa thug who allegedly threw a rock in the face of an ICE agent while attempting a siege on an ICE facility in South Portland. The truth is that Antifa has massive institutional support throughout the nation from Democrats who support its goals to violently suppress enforcement of illegal immigration, enforce our immigration laws. But few are as vocal as Murillo, who has many lurking in the shadows, subtly working to undermine any crackdown against Antifa and other similar left-wing terror groups. This is the sinister fifth column working to destroy America from within. This is the enemy within that President Trump was talking about when he visited with our generals, admirals, and other military leaders yesterday. President Trump has declared war on these forces and is mobilizing the military against them, and not a moment too soon. You see, they are the existential threat to the nation, and they must be resoundingly defeated, or America is done. This is the fight the president spoke about yesterday when he addressed the threat from within. Thanks, sadly, in the wake of the political assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk, this administration is deeply committed to ending the financing of the terror networks that are in some cases NGOs, in other cases actually taxpayer funded, that are waging war against the United States. We're not talking about speech here. We're talking about those who advocate and plan and orchestrate mayhem, violence, arson, and yes, let's just say it, murder. America is at war. We haven't seen this since the 1970s. It's why Richard Nixon's presidency is being re-examined, because in his case it was the Liberation Army, the Black Panthers, and the Weathermen Underground who were bombing public buildings and killing citizens. Today it is Antifa and Black Lives Matter. The president's right. We are at war. The American people voted to deal with this in the strongest possible terms in the last election, and President Trump is carrying out that mandate. God bless Pete Hegseth while we're at it, telling our military leaders that they got to trim down. I can't imagine anything worse than a fat general or an admiral. Well, yeah, I can. It would be a fat general or an admiral wearing a dress. No dresses on dudes, as the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said yesterday. In the meantime, the Anti-Defamation League has cataloged every conservative, every white person, and every Trump supporter as a hate monger on the par with the white supremacists or Klansmen for years, including Turning Point USA, for being responsible for shaping the culture that resulted in Charlie Kirk being brutally assassinated. The ADL has received massive backlash and have now been forced to remove their infamous glossary of extremism from their website. See, the ADL thinks that anybody to the right of Nikita Khrushchev or Joseph Stalin is an extremist. The ADL stated, with over 1,000 entries written over many years, the ADL glossary of extremism has served as a source of high-level information on a wide range of topics for years. At the same time, an increasing number of the entries in the glossary were completely and totally outdated. We also saw a number of entries intentionally misrepresented and misused. Moreover, our experts have continued to develop more comprehensive resources and innovative ways to provide information about anti-Semitism, extremism, and hate. So while the ADL demonizes Turning Point USA, the conservative organization that teaches free enterprise, free speech, capitalism, and the U.S. Constitution to college and high school students, they spread propaganda on behalf of Antifa. On Antifa, the ADL wrote that while some Antifa adherents have engaged in violence or vandalism at rallies and events, that is not the norm, despite disinformation campaigns that suggest otherwise. No, actually, that's completely untrue. Antifa is rooted in violence and mayhem. That is, of course, the entire point. But despite their backtracking, the ADL should be considered a subversive, far-left propaganda organization by the Trump administration. In my opinion, they should lose all nonprofit designations and be named in an upcoming RICO case cracking down on the far-left apparatus at war with the United States of America. Joe Rogan, interestingly enough, expressed shock and the glee that was expressed by others over my friend Charlie Kirk's murder. The UFC commentator and stand-up comedian Joe Rogan continues to get a crash case in education about the nature of America's current left. Rogan, who hosts what I'm told is the world's most popular podcast, recently expressed shock at how many leftists were actually celebrating the assassination of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Rogan said he would go around to college campuses and have arguments with people or other discussions with people or debates, but it infuriates people because they felt like this guy is going against the progress that we've made in society. But what did he not feel was progress, like it was the progressive agenda that was being pushed in most college campuses. It's a leftist, Marxist sort of agenda. He didn't think that that was the correct way to live. I'm quoting Joe Rogan here. I don't know Rogan, but he's a longtime friend of my good friend Alex Jones. He's appeared on Jones's program and vice versa, talking openly about conspiracy. Well, Rogan has been more liberal-leaning throughout his entire life. It was really not until last year when Rogan finally took the plunge, and I think when he realized that Trump was about to win, endorsed Donald Trump for president. Or perhaps it was the events of Butler, Pennsylvania that changed his mind. His opinion, the opinion of someone who's more moderate, coming around to support MAGA and the political right, is emblematic of what I think is going on across the entire country. No longer can people delude themselves into believing that the right is the crazy side, or that there are crazies on both sides, and both of whom is a problem. It is now undeniable that the political left is filled with psychopaths who hate America and the hate foundations of normal society. And if we don't stand up to them, they will do to us what the Bolsheviks did to Russia and the Maoists did in China. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is calling out Democrats for falsely claiming they are not trying to give free health care to illegal immigrants. You see, that's what this government shutdown is really all about. In order to keep the government functioning, the Republicans have produced what is called a clean continuing resolution. That means no new spending, none whatsoever. The government would continue to be funded on an emergency basis based on the current levels of funding. The Democrats, under the leadership of Chuck Schumer, refused to go along. You see, they want billions of dollars in new spending for illegal immigrants' health care. Maxine Waters even admitted it yesterday. So the U.S. government is now already partly shut down after the legislation was not passed to keep the government fully funded by the midnight deadline last night. Democrats have claimed that Republicans want to strip health care benefits away from Americans, but these are the same people who said that the big, beautiful bill, which include the largest tax cut on the American people in U.S. history, as well as ensuring that 88% of those currently receiving Social Security benefits would pay no taxes on them, and did not cut either Medicare or Social Security, did both. The Democrats claim that Republicans, again, want to strip health care away from Americans. And this is where the disagreement over funding the government stems from. The Republicans correctly say the Democrats want to give free health care to illegals, and they refuse to support that in a final funding deal. On Fox News, Vice President Vance set the record straight. Let's listen to the Vice President.
A Democrat talking point. They say we're not actually trying to give health care benefits to illegal aliens, and here's why it's not true. There are two Biden-era programs that explicitly gave the taxpayer health care money to illegal aliens that we turned off when President Trump took over in January. Program number one is there's a lot of emergency health care at hospitals that are provided to illegal aliens. That was funded by the federal government. We turned off that funding because, of course, we want American citizens to benefit from those hospital services, not to be taxed and then to have those hospital services go to illegal aliens. The second of which is the Biden administration gave mass parole to millions upon millions of illegal aliens, and then they simultaneously made those parolees eligible for health care benefits funded by taxpayers. In the One Big Beautiful Bill, President Trump and congressional Republicans turned off that money to health care funding for illegal aliens. The Democrats want to turn it back on. And in their initial proposal, the first thing that they put out to reopen the government, they actually turned that money for health care benefits for illegal aliens back on. So it's not something that we made up. It's not a talking point. It is in the text of the bill that they initially gave to us to reopen the government. It's preposterous for them to run away from it now. But look, let's set that all to the side. Let's open up the government. Let's negotiate on all of these healthcare policy issues. Obviously, we're not going to support healthcare benefits for illegal aliens, but we will work with them to lower healthcare costs for American citizens if they're willing to do so.
So low IQ Representative Maxine Waters even confirmed Vice President Vance's sentiments by saying Democrats are demanding health care for everybody after being asked by a reporter if her party supported health care for illegal immigrants. Democrats are not going to win this showdown. The public seems to be on their tricks, unlike past shutdowns of the government where Republicans got a disproportionate amount of the blame. All of the polling that I've examined demonstrates that the Democrats will hold the blame here. But there's another side benefit that I think many miss, and that is this is a unique opportunity for President Donald Trump and his brilliant director of the Office of Management Budget, Russ Vought, to zero out billions of dollars of useless federal spending and to end the jobs of non-essential bureaucrats who don't even bother showing up at the office most of the time anyway. The public is totally on to their tricks. They can't run and hide from their position of wanting to give all kinds of government assistance to illegal immigrants who they see as a voting bloc that they must cater towards because they want them as future voters. I think that this entire shutdown will inure to the benefit of the Republicans, whose position I think is actually quite reasonable. This is the Schumer shutdown. Say it with me, the Schumer shutdown. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are so exercised about Donald Trump putting up a humorous video that they can't see straight. They don't understand that the American people are laughing along with the president. I think laughing at their position as well. No one in their right mind, no voter constituent, nobody who's currently paying taxes and working for a living thinks that the U.S. government should pay for health care costs for people who are in the United States illegally. So I can't figure out who the Democrats think that this is appealing to, other than to say it probably does have appeal to the primary voters that make up the Democrat Party. See, the old Democrat Party, the party of John F. Kennedy, the party of Harry Truman, that party literally no longer exists. The Democrat Party, the once great Democratic Party of leaders like Henry Scoop Jackson, for example, or even Franklin Roosevelt, that party literally no longer exists. And the Democrat Party of today has been taken captive by a rogue element of extreme progressives, if not Marxists, and the professional Democrat politicians like Chuck Schumer fear that voter power within the Democrat primary base. So take AOC, for example. Please, someone, as Henny Youngman would say. No, take AOC. If she challenges Chuck Schumer for the United States Senate in the Empire State, I predict to you that she will win that primary. She, after all, beat Joe Crowley, who was a congressman, head of the Democrat machine in Queens, to win the state to begin with. So there is panic among the professional corporate Democrats who realize that the left wing that they have nurtured, the progressive wing that they have fed for years, is now in the driver's seat. And Jasmine Crockett, AOC, and Bernie Sanders are now the face of the modern Democrat primary. That's not how I would want to go into a general election. This is why the Democrats' chances of taking back either House of Congress or regaining the White House at this point, I think, is remote to say the least. Those in my own party who keep talking about losing the elections don't seem to understand that in American politics, a week is a lifetime. You're listening to The Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. I'm Roger Stone. We'll be back with a bit more politics, so please, whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are re-entering the Stone Zone. I can't tell you how much I appreciate those warm words from Vice President J.D. Vance. The Trump administration has just found that nearly 50% of all immigrants in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area have committed some form of fraud, including bogus marriages, overstaying visas, falsifying employment, forging documents, and abusing the H-1B and F-1 visas. The Twin Cities have become a renowned hub for Somali migrants, with 82,000 Somalis living in Minneapolis. One migrant was found to have bought a fake death certificate for $100 so he could marry his way into the U.S., despite the fact that his wife was actually living with his 5 children in Minneapolis. That migrant has another wife in Sweden with 3 additional children. Another migrant in the area was the son of a terror suspect on the no-fly list who was frantically attempting to commit marriage fraud to become a U.S. citizen before being caught and is now awaiting deportation. This fraud was uncovered as part of an operation called Twin Shield. Similar operations are underway across the country. This comes as Medicaid fraud operations are being discovered across the country, with migrants scamming benefits that should be going to seniors and low-income Americans. These findings prove the adage, in my opinion: import the third world, become the third world. Multiculturalism is not enriching America, but rather causing more fraud, more crime, and more decay, as our country's historical demographics are being eroded for the purposes of causing a permanent Democrat rule. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has halted $18 billion in infrastructure spending for New York City over the city's embrace of harmful racist DEI policies. OMB Director Russ Vought, a good friend of mine, one of those brilliant men I've ever met, said roughly $18 billion in New York City infrastructure projects have been put on hold to ensure funding is not flowing based on unconstitutional DEI principles. See, this spending will affect repairs for the Hudson Tunnel project and the 2nd Avenue subway, which are frankly desperately needed. But all construction projects in New York City have mandated race and gender-based quotas that must be fulfilled. That may be changing in the days to come. If New York City does the unthinkable and they elect the Ayatollah Zoran Mamdani, as appears to me to be extraordinarily likely, I think he'll double down on these policies no matter how much they hurt the people. Not that Andrew Cuomo would be much better, as we saw how corrupt and anti-Trump he was as the governor of New York. Cuomo can at least be reasoned with, potentially on certain issues. He's at least somewhat more pragmatic. But Mamdani is a far-left ideologue. He believes the ends justifies the means, and the means will be the destruction of prosperity and the end of the rule of law in New York City like we have never actually seen before. It is absolutely true. I saw the interview myself where Zoran Mamdani said the only purpose of incarcerating those convicted of violent crimes is to please the victims. In other words, he doesn't believe in our criminal justice system. If you think that he's not going to defund the police, if you think he's not going to do away with cash bail, if you don't think he's going to open the jails, then you really don't understand who he is. Meanwhile, the latest polls continue to show that while he leads, the one candidate who has consistently gained is Republican Curtis Sliwa. At this point, however, I would predict, even with the withdrawal of Mayor Eric Adams, if I had to bet, I think the socialist, progressive, Marxist, jihadi, Mamdani is most likely your next mayor. Bad news for the people who live in New York City, but for national Republicans, unfortunately, New York City will become a petri dish, a laboratory to prove to the American people what happens to your city when you inadvertently elect communists. I'm Roger Stone. You've been listening to The Stone Zone. God bless you and Godspeed. Until we meet again.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?